We have joining us this afternoon, and I want to welcome him. We have Mayor Will Lewis of Havelock. And Will, good afternoon to you.
Hey, Lockwood. Good afternoon to you.
Thank you for taking the time to be with us. And we have Jamie Normant, who is as I mentioned earlier, the Government Relations Director for Allies Cherry Points Tomorrow, but also an attorney with Ward & Smith. And Jamie, good afternoon to you as well, and thanks for taking the time to be with us.
Welcome. Good afternoon. Hope you're doing well.
Doing well. All right. Were both of you at the Pentagon last week? Did both of you go to to visit the Pentagon?
We did not go to the Pentagon this last week. This last week we were at an Association of Defense Communities ADC Connect event that was hosted up there to talk about communities and their relationships with the bases.
What did you learn in that event? Who was in attendance at that?
So this is one of those events that the Association of Defense Communities does that they call their Quick Connects, where it's like just a one-day event as opposed to their longer conferences. But they invite folks from the Pentagon to come, and we did have some folks from different branches, Navy, Army, Air Force, that were there to talk about installations and energy and kind of relationships with the communities. And then the attendees, it was a lot of communities like Havelock or the organizations that support them, like Allies for Cherry Points Tomorrow. And then some industry folks that were there from larger industry companies that work directly with the military. And a lot of the focus this time was talking about how much more important that relationship between the community and the base has gotten, and then what that looks like moving forward as the landscape keeps changing, as it were.
How important is Cherry Point perceived by the DoD at this point insofar as our investment in the Department of Defense?
Marine Corps Air Station Cherry Point has always been a critically important asset to national security. Since its original opening during World War II all the way up to today, it's one of the premier air stations in the world. And I'm including in that the Navy and the Air Force. It's among the best. And certainly it's the largest Marine Corps air station. So I think its strategic value is well known and well documented. What we've seen over the last 10 years, though, is a really important financial investment that the nation has made in Cherry Point to make it a base not just for the last 70 years, but a base that will thrive for the next 70 years. And that's what we're seeing. The $2 billion in investment, the location of our state-of-the-art Joint Strike Fighter F-35 squadrons, the headquarters 2nd Marine Air Wing, the Fleet Readiness Center East, all of that at Cherry Point makes it an incredibly important asset. Of course, to our region, we're very proud of our Marine Corps community, but to the nation as well.
Will, I'm going to go to you as mayor of Havelock, but also president of Allies for Cherry Points Tomorrow. ACT, by the way, is the acronym. You know, the other aspect of this is the role that the communities play in the support of these installations. Did that topic come up, and does it come up often in these meetings?
It did come up, Lockwood, and it is coming up with more and more regularity over the last couple of years. I like to think that here in Eastern North Carolina, we were way ahead of the curve on that one, where our relationship really is one of the strongest with an installation anywhere in the country. I think we're an example to be held up, but we're seeing it more and more specifically in just providing the needs for the installation, but also from a security perspective. And, you know, where the front line is now here. You know, we're not just worried about securing our areas overseas, but we've got to be taking care of our own base too. And the installations in the communities around that have a distinct role to play in that.
You know, I'm going to tell you a story, and Will, you probably, and Jamie, maybe you remember it as well. Keith Crisco, the former Secretary of Commerce for North Carolina, was meeting in Havelock many years ago. He's no longer with us, unfortunately, but I'll never forget. He looked at the group there. We were at the TEC, the Tourist Events Center. And he said, if Cherry Point were to shut its doors, I remember vividly, he said, do not bother to come call me. He said, there's nothing the state of North Carolina can do to replicate what you have here in Havelock and Eastern North Carolina. That was a stunning statement. And Jamie, do you remember that? Were you there that day when he said that?
I was there, and to put a finer point on it, he emphasized that the Fleet Readiness Center as a premier aerospace depot that employs civilians would be the gem of any state that would want an aerospace industrial facility, private or public. And what he said was if FRC East closed or downsized, he could not recruit another business to replace it. It was that important to the community.
So using
I was there as well, and I would just add to what Jamie said. That was years ago when the economic impact was barely $2 billion,
right,
and FRC was probably in the 3,500 employee range. Now they're well over 4,000 employees, and the 2024 number for economic impact to the region is now $2.6 billion.
Wow!
So it's even grown enormously from when Secretary Crisco made that comment.
Okay. Going back to, and again, I want to thank our guest for being with us this afternoon. We have Jamie Norman, who is the Government Relations Director for Allies for Cherry Points Tomorrow, and I keep giving you a variety of titles, Jamie. I hope I'm fairly accurate on that. Government Relations, is it Director? Well, with Government Relations with Allies for Cherry Points Tomorrow, and also Will Lewis, the mayor of Havelock, but also the president of Allies for Cherry Points Tomorrow, ACT. My reason for bringing that topic up is and Jamie, you said it's a dynamic environment. You didn't say those words exactly, but I'm paraphrasing. And the fact that we obviously can't control what happens in the Department of Defense. We can obviously, I think, argue our case, present the facts. But it seems to me, and I'm going to you on this one, Will, that the real effort, the real work has to be done. And when I say locally, not only locally in Havelock, not only locally in Eastern North Carolina, but locally in the state of North Carolina. Do you feel, and I'm putting you on the spot, but do you feel North Carolina appreciates, as we just talked about a moment ago about Keith Crisco, appreciates the significance of Cherry Point and FRC East?
I think that I think the state of North Carolina understands that a whole lot better than they have in the past, and I think they've done a lot of things that evidence that, like the partnership at the Global Trans Park, mm-hmm. And the money that they've put into the budget in the past that supports Cherry Point. I still think that there's a translation issue when you cross I-95 and people on the other half of the state that in some ways they do understand what it is, but they don't really understand it at a level that would probably be beneficial. But I think that's getting better as well. And at the end of the day, as long as the state and the NCMAC and the DMV, who, by the way, our Secretary of DMV has spent a lot of time making sure she understands the military ecosystem of North Carolina and how we fit in that. I think all that is definitely trending in a direction where the state is very involved. Are we doing the best job like every other state in the union? No, but I would say we're doing a very, very good job, and the folks in leadership at the state are doing their best to make sure that we are going to be that number one state in support of the military. So I think it's all positive from that perspective.
Okay, but you bring up another interesting aspect. I'm going to go to you on this one, Jamie. Again, Jamie Norman, Government Affairs Director. It's a competitive world out there, Jamie. Obviously, as Keith Crisco pointed out in that conversation, I think it was like 2004. That was a long time ago, easily 20 years ago. The fact that we have this asset, I would assume and expect other states, other regions would love to see this relocated to their particular bailiwick. Is that extant? Does that potential survive?
Well, we focus a lot on base resiliency and sustainability as a way to keep our mission here, keep our civilians here, keep our Marines here. It's very hard to move a mission. It's very hard to move a base, but it certainly does happen. And there's always the opportunity for us to get additional work or other installations to take work from Marine Corps Station Cherry Point and Fleet Readiness Center East. It's often easier said than done, but in the current administration, where it's a very dynamic and quickly changing atmosphere, we are always looking and on guard for changes like that. It's not competitive in the same way it is in the private sector, but it's absolutely important that ACT and our whole community continue to understand how Cherry Point fits into the overall national security framework, how it is treated in the Pentagon and on Capitol Hill. All those things help us to not necessarily take missions from others, but help us grow and sustain what we have.
All right. And with that said, the other aspect of this, and again, going back to you on this one, Will, Jamie said sustainability. And, of course, here we are in coastal North Carolina, and we are subject to a lot of challenges. For example, I think Camp Lejeune has just concluded a 3-point-something billion, that's with a B, $1 billion refurbishment as a result of Hurricane Florence. Does our geography in your conversations with other community leaders pose a problem or a challenge for our sustainability of FRC East?
Well, it is always a challenge, and we certainly have had our fair share, specifically Hurricane Florence, of damage here on the insulation at the same time that Lejeune did, and have gotten through that. But I would use the old adage that my grandma might have said, if you took your problems and threw them in the middle of the room and everyone else did the same, you'd probably leave with your problems. Uh-huh. And when we go to these larger picture Association of Defense communities and you talk to bases that are flooding in every rain event. Right. We're Marine Corps and under the Navy, all those bases are around water and on the coasts, and some of them have way worse sustainability issues than we do. Doesn't mean we ignore it. We still are very focused on making sure that we're doing the things the base needs from a resiliency perspective, particularly from energy, power, clean water, wastewater, and things like that, to make sure that they have what they need in those situations. But I'd say the way the nature of it has changed, Lockwood, is the conversation also includes what is the base doing to make sure that the community is resilient as well. Mm-hmm. And we've seen that since Florence, and certainly in the last few years, of just because the base is resilient doesn't mean they can do their job if all their right. people live out in our community. So there's a lot of conversation, particularly here with Cherry Point and our community, about what are they doing to make us resilient at the same time that we're doing the same with them. And that's how the conversations change. And I think if bases like Cherry Point want to be successful in the future, dealing with environmental impacts and being resilient, that's how the conversation has to work. It can't just be one-sided.
All right. We're talking with, and that's Mayor Will Lewis, and also James Norman of Ward to Smith, and he's the Government Affairs Director for Allies for Cherry Points Tomorrow. Again, going back to that competitive environment, Jamie, what about that? Do we, in your conversations with those other communities, are they finding themselves now having to deal with I'll use the word, a different environment because of the expectations of the military, and to that point, the ability of the workforce to actually be able to get to the facility? That's a big challenge too. But what about that? Is that part of the calculus, if you will?
It is. And last week I spent time with the Hampton Roads equivalent of ACT, which promotes and helps protect the Navy mission in the Norfolk area. Also spent some time with the Ellsworth Air Force Base community support organization out in South Dakota. And even though we're all very different installations, we have very similar concerns and challenges and opportunities. And certainly workforce development is very important to all of those installations, but especially Cherry Point with FRC East, where we have to have skilled labor, engineers, right. logisticians, and others who can support military aviation depot work. And the installations that we talk to, not just in Washington, D.C., but regularly across the state and across the nation, we all try to learn from one another. We certainly see what other groups are doing sometimes better than what ACT is doing. Mm-hmm. Oftentimes we are encouraged by what ACT is doing because others are trying to emulate what ACT is doing. And I think it's more of a community effort, like you said, an effort to keep the military up to date on what the community needs are, make sure the community supports the military installation inside the gate and outside the gate. All that is very important.
And of course, it is a closer relationship. And before we wrap things up, I think that's an important story. That is one of the purposes of Allies for Cherry Points tomorrow, is it not, Will? To create that close relationship of community and the installation?
Absolutely. The relationship is really the hub of the whole thing. Making sure that they have trust in us and we have trust in them, and we understand their needs and they understand what we're capable of. And then everything kind of grows from that in how you can make things work for the installation and for the community. And so, yeah, a lot of the time, like even just last week with Jamie and I in D.C., a lot of that time was spent building connections and relationships across the entire sector of what we do, so that we can make sure that we're building that the right way. And that is the key. And it's no different than anything else. And in this case, it's just something more complicated to understand.
Well, and we've talked about this, that North Carolina wants to be military friendly. And, of course, I think it starts at home for all intents and purposes.
It definitely does. And I think like our community, we do definitely lead the way in showing how to build that relationship the right way. I think it does start at home. I think when we want to have a conversation with, whether it be Representative Cairns, or we want to talk to Representative Tyson, or we want to talk to Senator Brinson in our area, if we've built a relationship like we should, then it helps permeate that throughout the state. So it does start with us.
Well, that's an important issue. And, of course, Jamie, as we wrap it up with you, Jamie Norman, again, of Allies for Cherry Points Tomorrow, Government Affairs Director, that is, in your capacity, government affairs, it's working with government, both state, local, and national.
Absolutely correct. And we focus a lot on what goes on in Washington, D.C., but our local delegation to the General Assembly is of vital importance to the health and well-being of Marine Corps Air Station Cherry Point Fleet Readiness Center East. As Will pointed out, Representative Cairns, Representative Tyson, Senator Sanderson, Senator Brinson, and even further out, folks who are in Pitt County, Onslow County, Duplin County, and I could go actually across the entire state, that we have counted on to help us with supporting the military in general and Marine Corps aviation specifically. And, of course, our local governments are partners in ACT. ACT essentially is a partnership of governments, of individuals, and private interests to support the air station. So federal, state, and local are all very important. We do lean a lot in Washington, D.C., heavily on our partnership that we have with Congressman Murphy. Dr. Murphy has been a fantastic advocate for Cherry Point. Senator Budd, Senator Phillips, and then our members from the North Carolina delegation that are on the House Armed Services Committee that do not even live in our community, they want to support us too. But I don't think they would support us if we didn't ask them.
Right.
They don't know what's going on necessarily. And it's up to ACT and what you're doing in the community to get the word out so that we can ask them for help. And they will help us when we ask.
Well, I think that's important, and it's, of course, again, the reason for Allies for Cherry Points Tomorrow. By the way, the website, Allies for Cherry Point tomorrow.org.
That's right, and on Facebook.
All right. I want to thank Mayor Will Lewis of Havelock, and Jamie Norman. And as we begin to wrap things up, very quickly, I just got a note here. Moore City government is advising residents that both lanes of Highway 70 west by Sam Garner Road have been closed due to a car accident. We're asking for patience in that area. Thanks to our guests for joining us this afternoon.